to do marketing properly, anything for any business, build your database. That's the first thing that I would tell them to do, because many restaurant owners fail to do that. And they've approached me, when they approach me sometimes when they are not in a good place and they're trying to, hey man, we need marketing, and when I talk to them, I say, hey, do you have a database? And they're like, oh, no, we don't have anything. So we got to build that from scratch. So you know how long that's going to take, right? So we can definitely run ads. We'll do all these different things that you can do. But to make your marketing way more effective and cheaper in the long term, building a database is key.
Welcome to Whisking It All with your host, Angela Esposito, co-founder of Whisk.ai, a food and beverage intelligence platform. We're going to be interviewing hospitality professionals around the world to really understand how they do what they do. Welcome to another episode of Whisking It All. We're joined today with Sebastian Stahl, the CEO and founder of Breath Marketing. It's a strategic restaurant marketing agency. Sebastian, thank you for being here with me today.
Thanks, Angelo. Thanks for inviting me to your podcast, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. Obviously, the theme of marketing is always interesting, but I think specifically interesting for our restaurateur listeners. A lot of good, but a lot of bad advice out there. So hopefully we can go through some of the things you've learned over the years. But as always, I'd like to start with the kind of backstory of what got you into the hospitality space.
Man, okay, so dude, since I was young, I mean, really in college, I started developing this, taste for the restaurant business, just seeing, just going to restaurants in college and just seeing how everything worked. And it seemed like an orchestra playing, you know what I mean? And I really liked that aspect, and I was always on the creative side of things. So I really liked the combination of how everything came into, together into one place, right? From the food, people, music, everything tying in together, just the flow of things. They were just something that, connected with me. Out of college, and we started looking into this stuff with my brother, and we were looking into doing a franchise at that time in Latin America, and that didn't happen, fortunately, because that wouldn't have been a good decision with that franchise. But anyway, after that, we got into developing a concept. At that time, it was still Chipotle was kind of new, all these cool things happening. Payway was kind of new too, at that time, these concepts that were growing, and so we started developing our own concept with my two brothers. Actually, both are older than me, and but each one of us kind of had their own thing going on, and so it was me that stayed with the restaurant, and these guys kind of they went their own way, and I stuck to going with the restaurant. So that's how I got started to open the first restaurant. Actually, it was in Guatemala City. Back in 2005, and it was a fast casual concept. And at that time, again, it was kind of fairly new. The whole thing, it was kind of developing still, and that's what we did, man. So that's how I got into it. I was open breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which was insane because I didn't know what the hell I was getting into. And but pretty
every
fast.
Day?
Every day, man.
Oh my God.
So pretty fast, I learned how crazy and my decision was, and how hard it is, and to be executing at a restaurant at that level. And of course, I was everywhere. I was in the kitchen. I was I was on the floor. I was just doing everything. Everything that seemed glamorous about a restaurant, it really isn't.
Yeah. And what are some of the things you learn? I love talking to restaurateurs and entrepreneurs in general, but I love talking to restaurateurs and understanding what kind of walls they hit or things they didn't anticipate. So as you kind of started this first venture, your restaurant, it's exciting. And then it's now open. What are some things that kind of hit you that stood out that you maybe didn't anticipate?
Oh man, there were just so many of them. Really, no idea how to streamline operations, at that time. And that's a big one. If you don't know, it's just, bringing a bunch of items into your menu, doing everything because you want to get it right. You want to have great recipes and all that stuff, but execution wise, it's terrible. Also again, like I said, the hours were just insane, and I would have never opened for breakfast if I knew what I was getting into. So that was the stupidest idea because it wasn't even a breakfast joint. It was more of like a lunch and dinner space. So that.
Did you have I gotta ask, did you have people coming for breakfast at all or not even?
Just a few. I was like trying to build it, but it was terrible. It was just a bad idea in general.
I love it. Love the honesty.
Yeah, man, it sucked. But lunch and dinner were actually pretty solid. We started getting into delivery and all that stuff. That was also working well. But then staffing, man, just like really, I think really at that time, I wasn't a great leader. I just, you know what I mean? Like I was just trying to get things going.
Learning.
In learning, learning as I went. And I knew a little bit because before getting into the restaurant business, I was actually working in different companies. I worked for Lee Burnett, like the advertising agency, and I worked for Keller Company, the cereal company, marketing. So that was my background. But like restaurant operations, I was just figuring everything out as I went. You know what I mean? I had nobody to talk to. I mean, my cousin he's a restaurateur as well. So my uncle, Italian guy, and very solid operator, and he was very successful in the city, and had a few restaurants, and that's what I had to go off on, and then just reading. You know what I mean? But so there was quite a bit of things that I have no idea, and I messed up. I just messed up, but. And that's it. And then I wasn't even, when it comes to numbers and managing the finances at that time when you're operating 7 to close in the morning, it's not, there was no time. So, it was a mess with, food cost books and all that stuff. It took me a while to be able to kind of catch up and start getting that stuff organized, so those are just a few things, man.
I can only imagine the stuff you learn. But honestly, it's like opening a restaurant's probably like a, for lack of a better analogy, it's probably like a exponential version of like an MBA, just in the sense that running any business is hard. But I personally feel like running a restaurant is probably just all that, but worse and harder because there's just there's so many things that have to go right. Some that are in your control, some that are out. You're dealing with perishable products. You're dealing with staff. You're dealing with technology. You're dealing with, retail. There's just it's literally like dealing with everything. You're dealing with online. You're dealing with marketing. So it's almost like, do you want to learn everything about business? Start a restaurant because you're gonna have to learn everything. But having said, I'm curious to know, so from those early days, really cool that you took that risk, right? Because I think it's probably was a step into leading you where you are today at Breath. So what was the evolution? So after that restaurant, was it straight to where did the idea for Breath come, or were you working in other restaurants before that?
Man, that came much later. So that was 2005, and again, I was, some of the things that I wasn't doing because I didn't have the time was marketing, and I knew marketing at that time, which was still that was 2005, still social media and all that stuff was getting started. You know what I mean? I remember Facebook and all that stuff. But
right.
I mean, I didn't have the time. I was just operating, So, after that, that restaurant we sold, and then I went to Miami, and then Miami, I actually got a master's degree, and then I swore that I was never going to get back into the restaurant industry because it was insane, and I wasn't going to get into it again. And then I had the idea again of opening another restaurant in Miami.
Love it. I love it.
It's like the Godfather stuff, man. Once you're in, keep everything out.
Pull me back in. Yeah, exactly. Once I'm out, pull me back in. That's so true. And so tell me more about that. Before we jump into Breath, I like always hearing the evolution. So, from first restaurant, learning a lot, come to Miami, get your master's. Now you're like, hey, you know what? I want a bit more of a beating. Let me open a restaurant in Miami. So what was the concept there? Tell me a bit more about what happened.
So in Miami, it was a complete different animal. The US is completely different, and just talking about cost and investment, I had no idea what we were going to spend, and it was always triple where you're really going to spend. So anyways, so I started asking around, trying to find out, how this thing would, go, how we could do it. And I found a couple of restaurant consultants, just trying to understand the city and everything. And so I started, basically putting the numbers together and all that stuff, the business plan, business plans, if you've been in it, they go to shit in a second.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyways, so we found, I started seeing that, and it was going to be a pretty expensive project, right? So I started working with a partner also, and he got into the business with me. And so we started putting it together. We had some good guidance. We actually hired the He was the ex-director of Think Food Group of the Jose Andres group. So he was a very nice guy. His name's Tony. And he guided us at the beginning, you know, because like how to do things there and you know, how to set everything up. And we had
and was the concept, just to ask real quick, was the concept also fast casual, or was this more of a full service?
This was full service.
Full service.
Complete different animal, man. So like, yeah, I didn't even know what I was getting into, honestly. So you know, full service restaurant. And I had this, you know, I did envision that, had the sense that where we were opening was going to develop pretty quickly because it was up and coming. It was Wynwood. Now Wynwood is completely developed in Miami, and it's just like a hotspot, right? So at that time, you know, it was still a little bit ghetto-ish. So, but it was up and coming, and it was really cool. All the artworks and all the stuff that was happening in the area. So we were fortunate to get a great space on North Miami Avenue, you know, with pretty big space and with a parking lot in the back. And we basically doubled the size of the restaurant by doing a terrace. And so, you know, it's pretty cool, man. Like we got good rent at that time. Now it's crazy. But anyway, so that's what happened. And it was an Asian, Latin inspired concept. We worked with a chef that used to be the chef de cuisine at Nobu. So he had really good experience in, you know, food we were looking for. So, and we tried all different things, man. We worked with different chefs. We worked with him, and we came up with a really cool menu. And the execution was very creative, you know, with how we were presenting things, and it was kind of like inspired with streets. And so we had like, you know, different things, you know, from like a ceviche in a bag that we had served. Like, I don't know, it was cool ideas, but execution wise, it was a nightmare. But so you know, learned a lot there, man. We opened that restaurant first. I remember just, you know, friends and family night, or I don't know if it was friends and family, if it was the media night. And it was just pouring. It was summertime, man. So like the AC unit wasn't working properly. So it was hot as hell. There was a ton of people in there. And then the water was coming in because it came from the terrace inside the restaurant. So like, you know, flooding.
When it rains, it pours, right? Like
extremely hot, people sweating. You know what I mean?
God.
I was just having a meltdown trying to get this going, man. Everybody.
Trying to make the ceviche in a bag as it's raining.
Let me get you the full experience on your table. You know what I mean? Like all these visions that, you know, all these visions that you think about that are going to come out really neat, but once you do them, they suck. You're like, wow, man, it's not going to work out. So that's part of the process, you know, of learning. You know, it was a really cool concept, man. Like the space was really nice, the outdoor area and everything. After we were able to work it out, it flowed really well. But it was a weekend thing, man, because Wynwood at that time, it was very up and coming still. There was not enough traffic during weekdays. And I made it wrong that we also made some different, you know, bad judgments in terms of how the market worked and how it behaved. You know, in terms of we assumed that like Midtown and Wynwood, which are really, really close, everything would be together in terms of the market, and it really isn't. It's completely different. Like Wynwood is a whole different ballgame. Midtown is a whole different ballgame. So it wouldn't mix. So we were assuming we were going to get traffic during the week from Midtown, and it didn't happen. You know, like you know, and that time it was only a bunch of photographers and artists living in Wynwood. It wasn't, you know, what it is now. Nobody can afford to live there now, like the artists. It's expensive as hell. But Miami in general. But that's what happened. So it was high operating costs. Also is very different, man, from, you know, being an owner, being in the trenches, and then having and you know, when you're working with other people that are guiding you, but they haven't really been where you are. The guidance that you can receive is not really the best, right? Because they mean well, but when you're at that point where you need to, you know, run with skeleton crew and be able to make your operation truly efficient to sustain and be able to, you know, to move forward, you need hands-on experience. And like I did, I had it. We're like, okay, man, let's, you know, streamline this whole thing. Let's cut the menu. Let's change this. Let's change that. But, you know, I was still inexperienced, you know, with many things. But so going through this process, I learned a lot of, you know, how things needed to work. And then, you know, after that restaurant, you know, we came to a decision to actually, you know, either sell or partner with somebody. We're looking for a solution because we had made a large investment in that restaurant, and, you know, we're trying to save it. And if you've been there, of, you know, the people that have been there of closing a restaurant, it's heart-wrenching, man. Like it's just like, it's your baby, it's your concept.
It's your baby,
you put your heart in it. And I mean, the food was fantastic and we got great reviews, all that stuff, but you still don't see it work. And that's why the restaurant business is so hard, because it's not just one thing. There's so many things that need to be working and everything needs to be in place, right? From your operations to your space to your location, marketing, streamline of operations, cost, like everything. So if any of those are failing,
exactly. To your point, you can have amazing reviews, which is hard in itself, but you have great reviews, great food behind the scenes. You're not making a profit. You're bleeding money. You're not busy 4 days of the week. Your operating costs are too high, or just your overhead's too high. Like there's so many other factors. You can't hold on to food forever. It's perishable. So you got wastage. You got I can. What was, out of curiosity, because I know it was different. One was in Miami, one was in Guatemala City, but what would you say from your point of view was some of the pros and cons of, and I know it was also just different points of your life and whatnot, but in general of a fast casual versus an FSR?
Completely different. I mean, it's fast casual. It's, you can really streamline the operation and it can be a lot more efficient in terms of how you do that. And it's a lot more simple in many regards, right? In service, team members, inventory, costs, like everything, right? Because it's like a limited menu and it's made fresh, everything, right? But with full service, there's a lot more that goes into it, right? So you're staffing, the size of the operation, you know what I mean?
Reservations,
bar,
liquor licenses,
exactly. Liquor licenses, which are super expensive. Getting to your bar program, inventories, all of these different things that are, they're so different in a full service restaurant than a QSR, or events, which are very profitable, right? But, executing those properly, it's a whole different thing.
Right.
I mean, many differences, man. And then also, between the US and Latin America, of course, costs are very different, right. And then also culture. And then, costs are completely different. You can open a restaurant in Latin America for a lot less than you can in the States.
Right.
Especially Miami. Especially Miami. Just to play ball, you got to just look at permits, right? And that's just goes out the window and you never see that again.
Right, right.
So I'm curious. From scratch again.
Okay, well, that's a good tip. Yeah, from scratch is a hefty investment to say. I mean, it's a hefty investment no matter what, but from scratch is probably another level. And nothing ever goes according to plan, which is the other thing. So, like you kind of alluded to, whatever budgeting, double it, and some, and then you're probably there. And I'm curious. So what ended up happening? I know you said it's tough to close. So, like, eventually, did you guys partner? Did you sell? What happened? And then, like, what made you say, "Hey, it's time"? Like, what led to breadth?
Listen, man. So at that time, it was a difficult time. But I would tell you, I look back on it with certain nostalgia and in a good way, because it was a moment that helped me to grow in many different ways, right? Not only as a professional, but as a person as well. Because when you're too attached to material things, into your success, into your business, you can suffer quite a bit going through that, right? And because of all this like self-image that you may have of yourself, that you want to maintain of yourself. So I was really stripped away from all those things at that time. And I was able to, honestly, it was a spiritual experience in a way. I can tell you that business, and that's the way I see it. And that's the way I see life in general, man. It's just that's how things happen. We can talk about the practical stuff, but if you look deep into it, that's kind of what happened. And
that's awesome.
So it was really cool. It was a good experience in that sense, where I was really just, honestly, dude, I just gave it to God and just like, okay, let's see what we can do. And then just started looking at opportunities, taking the next right step. And so we talked to a bunch of people that were interested in the space, because it's a great space. And, I was living at the time in Brickell Avenue, and like I was in front of this other small restaurant, a great ceviche spot, like a Peruvian place on Brickell and First. And I had met the owner there a while back, and we just became friends. He was a nice guy from Mexico, and we just we talked, and he gave me his business card. But anyways, I hadn't even given it a second thought, because I was like, that's a very small restaurant. I don't know how is this going to translate to this space, But
right.
For some reason, I thought about it. There's no coincidences, and I pulled out the card, and I called him up, and I just said, "Hey, man, listen. This is what's happening. We have this beautiful space. This restaurant's not doing well. I think, but I'm looking for a partner. We're looking to do something here. And I think that your concept might be a good fit, because there's no sushi places at that time in Wynwood. They didn't have any sushi places, especially also it was an affordable price. And there was nothing like that in the area. right? It was that concept's a mix between fast casual and full service. It's like a hybrid. So the guy, it turns out, man, he says, yeah, let's talk. He came to the restaurant. We sat down. I remember having dinner there. We were still open. And, what he said was like, dude, actually, what I was already looking for a space to open up a bigger restaurant in this area. So this is perfect. So we made a deal right then and there. That's how it happened. That's how quickly it happened. And from basically, it took us like 3 months to close, turn it around, remodel, and open.
That's not bad. 3 months. That's awesome.
No, man. It was crazy. It was
fast,
super fast. Yeah. So it was very, it was great, man. It was very fortunate. Again, I think it was a blessing in so many ways for everybody involved, because we were able to kind of keep the space, the restaurant. We did not lose the investment at the time. We were able to kind of split the cake in different ways for that restaurant.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah.
And this guy had a lot of different ways of doing things. He was very structured, very process oriented, very smart guy, and very nice guy. And so we started working together. We're still managing that restaurant at that time. I had to basically put on the student hat and kind of step back and kind of learn their processes and everything. So it was a humbling experience, to say the least at that time. But it was, it just helped me see things in a whole different way. So, I learned a lot.
And I'm sure you learned a lot, no? I'm sure you probably learned quite a bit at that time.
100%, man. I learned a ton, because again, it was just very, very different. And so how everything was done, they had a commissary kitchen already with, a couple of restaurants. So it was thinking long-term. It was thinking structure, processes. So that's why, dude, I don't think it's a great idea for creatives to get in the restaurant business. If they're going to contribute, yes, but don't have them operate.
Right. Yeah, don't mix the two, because usually the creative way sometimes could be like the to your point, like with the bags, or might not be the most streamlined process, right?
So that restaurant started doing well since the beginning. We opened that restaurant, and again, it was a perfect fit for the area. It is still the highest selling restaurant for the group at this time, because it evolved. It's still around, man. It's been around. It's the highest selling restaurant.
That in itself is a feat, right? Like restaurants usually last like 2 years. So the fact that it's 10 years now or whatever it may be. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's been over 10 years, man. And it was pretty neat. It was pretty cool. And it was just, a very small crew of us at the beginning. It was this guy, his brother, great people. And then the director of operations at that time, his name's Ryan. He works at Toast now. But at that time, we didn't like each other, actually. But we became friends, and awesome. It was cool, man. And we started growing. Now it's it grew from that at that time. And I stepped out of operations, went into marketing, and it grew into a multi unit and concept hospitality group in Miami. It has a lot of presence now there with all these different concepts. And so I got to experience and go through the development of a small kind of mom and pop thing to what it is now.
That's so cool. And then how did you go from, running, I guess more operationally, running the multiple restaurant concepts, obviously learning a lot. How did those experiences then lead you to say, hey, I want to start a restaurant marketing, agency? So what happened was that once I stepped out of operations, which I was really happy to do that, because I was tired. So I went into marketing, man, and I started just kind of figuring things out, right? Because my background was marketing, but it was a complete different ballgame. Now it was social media, right? Now it was really, getting into Instagram, getting into all of these things. And at the time, I didn't really have the knowledge that I have now, of course. But I started, learning quickly in how we can market the restaurants. And as you know, restaurants are they were slow into adopting a lot of the technology that other businesses had before. So there was a lot of issues with tracking. There was a lot of issues with figuring out what was working. There was a lot of issues dude, how do we make this work? You know what I mean? And building a database and doing all these different things. Also, we had tried the PR side, which PR, I think it has its place and it's very good for particular, points or particular seasons, for the restaurant, depending on the concept that you have. But once you go through the initial phase of opening, or let's say you're doing a new menu launch or a new location, whatever, PR will just go to a certain extent, as far as it can go. Right. You know what I mean? Because it's not going to drive traffic. Right. So, and it can be expensive too. So we were just
I was trying to figure out, okay, how can I make this work? What happened was, and again, we didn't have the budget to hire a full team. So I had to hire agencies, so we were going through that process, and then, and I started working with different agencies that they didn't really have the experience in the restaurant world, because there were not many restaurant marketing agencies at the time. Now there's more, but and also they were very expensive. Most agencies, they were like, man, how can we afford this? Like, restaurants' margins are not great. They're not really big. So I was trying to, how can we make this? Anyways, we started working with different agencies, trying to get this thing done properly, and it was a challenge, man. Nobody really understood restaurants, because when it comes to restaurants, as you know, it's just a whole different ballgame. Like, okay, you can have ideas and you can execute different things, but if you don't know operations, if you don't know how the restaurant moves and how things affect costs, the people that are actually executing your fancy promotion at your restaurant, operations is gonna hate you. So they didn't really know the tools or the platforms for restaurants and all these things, and how we could find ways to to work with them and to be able to really show an ROI on what we were doing. And we were really one of, I think, because I remember working with a couple of marketing agencies, and we were investing in paid ads and all that stuff, and these guys were like, man, you guys are like the only restaurants like investing in this now, at that time. And because I saw that there was definitely, that was a route, that was the way to go. But so anyways, out of those frustrations, and out of the frustration that I experienced as a restaurant owner, not being able to do marketing properly because I didn't have the time, and also with experiencing frustrations going through different agencies that didn't know the business, and then going through and figuring out this whole process of how to do this right and how to really show an ROI for the things that we were doing for our concepts, right? And my job was on the line too, man. And our profits were on the line as well, man. So I had to figure this out.
To learn quick, yeah.
Exactly. So I figured out all the platforms, and I figured out, I went, because agencies would tell you, show you some graphics or whatever. Hey, here's the clicks, here are the open rate. Like, that doesn't really mean too much to me, So I started learning about, every single platform. I went in the back and I learned everything about it. I read everything about it until I started figuring out how to do it, myself, because I saw that they weren't able to execute at the level that I needed to. So then that idea came at that time, was like, okay, man, like, there's definitely a need here. There's definitely, because I would see other restaurants struggle with this, a need for an agency that understands restaurants, that understands strategy most of all, because that's what drives everything else. Running ads anybody can do, but doing it right and understanding strategy and how to really pinpoint the opportunities for restaurants in their different revenue centers where they can grow, that was the challenge. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where this idea came from, because I knew restaurants, I knew operations, and I knew strategy, both operationally and in marketing. So let me just kind of come up with an all-inclusive solution for restaurants where we can actually take it over from strategy to execution on all digital channels. So that's awesome. Kind of how Breath was born in my mind, and then happened.
And oh God. So yeah, so you got this idea in your mind, and I'm curious, right before we hit the COVID, because that's going to be a turn of events, but I know now, looking at your website and stuff, you do everything, as you mentioned, from strategic planning to the actual branding and social media management, design, content, reputation management, SEO, web design, et cetera, et cetera. But in the early days, obviously, I assume you maybe started off with maybe one or two of those things. I'm curious, like, what were the things that you can immediately help restaurants with from the marketing perspective, let's say in the earlier days? I know now it's really like a 360, but in the early days, was there like one or two niches that you did really well?
It was full service at that time was like my thing, because I knew full service very, very well. So that's kind of how it started. Actually, my first clients were these guys, from the group that I was working with, because, I was a partner with, I'm still a partner with these guys, but, those were my first clients, because COVID happened, everything went to crap basically, and nobody had any money. And basically it was a transition was made for me, you know what I mean? Because I had already this plan and I was already working on it, because I did want to go in.
Right.
And kind of do my own deal, but this just accelerated it, So when that happened, these guys were my first clients, because it was cheaper for them to pay me as an agency than to pay me as a director. So that's how it started out, and I was starting it. So with them, it was pretty easy, because I was already doing the same thing that I was doing for them, basically. You know what I mean?
Right. And just to
then,
pinpoint some things, because I want our audience to like think of some examples. So you're partnering with this group and now you're kind of taking over their marketing. What are some of the things you're doing like strategically? I imagine, you mentioned reputation management, social media. So like, what are some things you were doing, and like, can you just like touch on those?
first thing, like I said, everything stems from strategy, like understanding what the needs are for each restaurant. Each location is a little bit different, even if you have multi-units, because there's different, they vary in needs, right? So some locations might be doing great for lunch, other locations might not, depending on the location that they're at. So we're looking at patterns. We're looking at your revenue centers, and we're trying to identify where there's opportunities for growth. And that doesn't mean because, let's say, your happy hour sucks, that you're going to be able to actually push happy hour if your location's not right. It's because you can invest a lot in happy hour and trying to push that, all you want.
Right.
But if you're not in the right space, location, or menu, all of these things are not in place, it's not going to work, man. So you have to find what's going to work for each restaurant. So in this case, instead of focusing on that, we knew that lunch was doing well and we still had space for like driving more traffic. Why don't we just focus on that and grow it even more instead of trying to like tread water, you know what I mean? And trying to build something, a day part that's not going to work, right? And that's a mistake that I see a lot of restaurants making, with our clients. Like, hey, let me build dinner time, and you're a known breakfast spot. You know what I mean? Like, it's a stretch, man. So
it's funny though, because on that point, real quick, I think it's like we also do that on an individual basis, which it took me a while to learn this, but it's like we're almost taught sometimes like, oh yeah, like if you have a weak area, focus on it. But in a weird way, like that's not great advice. It's like if you suck at Excel, like it's probably not, like, sure, maybe take a weekend course so you don't suck as much. But really the idea is like, why don't you double down on the thing you're good at and just get better so you can like stand out, than like try to just look at the things you suck at and get okay at them. And I think to your point, it's similar in that kind of day part thing. It's like you always look at the new shiny thing. You're like, oh, we're not doing dinner. Okay, there's the opportunity. But it's like, no. You're doing lunch. Exactly. Lunch is doing well. There's room to grow it. How do we grow it?
Exactly. And that's it. It's the same with your menu, right? Like, you can think about, hey, you have this menu, it's working, and then you want to add more things to it. You can, but don't go that route yet. Again. So that's what we do in the first place. It's like it's examining where you're at, identifying your strengths, and identifying opportunities for amongst your revenue centers, and see what makes sense for your restaurant. A lot of what we're doing now is a lot of lead generation for private events, because especially with what's going on now. It just makes a ton of sense because you can control the cost. It's a high ticket item, and it's something tangible that you're getting, in front of you. So that's kind of where we start. But then everything else, again, as I mentioned, they're just channels. You know what I mean? If you base everything from strategy, and then you go into social, and you have a strategy for social that's going to be led by this things that you identified here, then it's going to work. If you just go, let me just post some pretty pictures and fun videos, it's not going to do it, right? And then also, there's a whole misperception of what social media actually is. Restaurants think, or a lot of restaurateurs think, that marketing is just social media. And as you know, that's not true at all, right? Because it's just a little part, and it's just a channel, right? But there's ways that you can do it right, but there's just so much more. So again, it's identifying the strategy, creating the strategy, and identifying the channels that you're going to use to communicate with people. And depending on the restaurant concept that you have, those are the channels that you're going to use, and you're going to see which ones are the most effective. You got to use all of them. You're not just going to use one of them. So let's say you have email, SMS, you have your push notification through your app, you have paid ads. All of them
maybe
are
some SEO.
Used. Exactly. SEO, all of that stuff you're going to use. You just have to know when and where, because not everything is created equal. It just depends on what you're going to be pushing. If it's a promotion, or if it's going to be, let's say, a new menu item. It's like, how are you going to go about this, right? And then also using your team, because your team is also a huge marketing channel, because they have to be trained, they have to know what's going on, so then they can communicate what you're putting out there, because you have hundreds of people. If you're fortunate, you have hundreds of people coming to your restaurant every day, and that's that's a touch point that you have between your team and them. So. Anyways, I hope that answers the question.
100%. That's super interesting. And like, so definitely you're painting a much more clear picture. And I can only imagine, right, like all the services you offer. Maybe to just give people an idea, who would be the ideal type of customer that you guys work with? Is it single location and multi? Is it just multi? Like, tell me more. Is it FSR? Is it a bit of everything? So I'd love to hear who you work with, and then maybe we can go through some like, wins that you've done.
Sure. So we work with both, really, with full service, and we also work with fast casual restaurants.
Okay.
And we work with multi-unit restaurants, and we work with independents, which is like single location independent restaurants. But it's mostly single location restaurants that have a certain revenue. Because the truth is that if you want to do this right, there needs to be a certain level of investment that you're going to need to make, not just whatever you're going to pay us as a fee, but also in terms of paid advertising, where you're going to be spending on that. So I'm very transparent, in how, when we talk to restaurant owners, because we just can't help everyone. I wish that we could, right? So they have to be at a certain level for this to make sense for them and for us as well, right? But basically what we do is take on their marketing. Is basically we would be their internal marketing team, and we do everything from strategy to, like I mentioned, to execution. So the ideal scenario is, multi-unit restaurants from 2 to 15, 20 units, because that's like the perfect scenario, because the distribution of costs works really well for them and then for us as well. And because at that point, they are not at the point yet where they want to hire a full team internally, but they're at a point where they prefer to hire an agency that knows restaurants that can do this professionally for them until they grow enough, until they can want to hire internally, right? Or some people just prefer to keep us, we've been working with some restaurants for, 4 years since we started, and they're at a certain level, they're multi-unit restaurants, but it's just there's a great collaboration and it works perfectly for both.
That makes sense. And like, just to give an idea, like, I know you probably work with quite a few clients and there's a lot of different wins you give them, but like any recent wins that come to mind, just to share with our audience, like, we had this guy that we did this paid ads for and we drove X amount of revenue, like anything you can share as a nugget that comes to mind, I think is cool.
Yeah, a recent one was, we do different things. Like I said, lead generation for private events has been, really solid, and it's been working. We've been doing it very successfully for different restaurants. And again, those are tangible results. But with one of our clients, they're based in Broward in Florida, the Padrino's restaurants, great people, favorite people. They're fantastic. But basically, they were struggling with one of their locations. They were struggling with Saturday nights, actually, in their bulk location. And so there was a promotion that we came up with. They actually came up with the actual promotion itself. We actually helped with marketing and developing the concept of it. But it was basically an experience. Instead of, we don't really like discounting. We're about creating experiences, creating value, so then you can bring people, right? So that's what really happened, right? So there was a Noche Cubana, so like Cuban night, that was created for Saturdays. And it was a set, basically a carving station for, roast pig, and we had a paella and all these different things that they had. And it was really about testing, right? So we did the first night of that for a set price. I think it was $40, $50 per person. And again, we created a campaign for this, all the creative, the concept, everything, and then we ran it. And there was the first night, when you're comparing Saturday versus Saturday, there was a 31% increase in sales and also a 30% increase in reservations. So that was very successful for that. We did that. And once we tested it out for a few nights, we saw that it was successful. Now it's being implemented. It's already implemented in a couple of the other locations, and it's working really well there as well. So that's kind of the process that we go through. We test, we see that it works, then we go into implementing those things in the different locations. So that's just one example that comes to mind. So I mean, there's a lot of them, but that's the first step.
Yeah, and I noticed you have a bunch of case studies too. So for people listening, they can go to breathmarketing.com and there's all kinds of case studies. But and then definitely at the end we'll do a quick plug, so where people can find you and all that good stuff. But one of the things I always like to share is just any nuggets of wisdom, because we have people listening. We have a lot of restaurateurs listening, and so obviously. You do full on services and there's a lot of strategy, so it's hard to generalize. But from your experience, are there any wins or tips you can share with people? And I know it's hard because it's but mistakes that you see often that you're like, hey, restaurant listeners listening to this Whiskey and All podcast, please implement XYZ, or please start using X, like anything you can just share?
For sure. So there's a few things, and you got to start at with the basics. Before, to do marketing properly, anything for any business, build your database. That's the first thing that I would tell them to do, because many restaurant owners fail to do that, and they've approached me, they approach me sometimes when they are not in a good place, and they're trying to, hey man, we need marketing, and when I talk to them, I say, hey, do you have a database? And they're like, oh no, we don't have anything. So we got to build that from scratch. So you know how long that's going to take, right? So we can definitely run ads. We'll do all these different things that you can do, but to make your marketing way more effective and cheaper in the long term, building a database is key. So implementing the systems that you need from, either if you have a online ordering system, if you can implement a rewards program where you have an incentive for people to sign up and give you their information, if you have online ordering, either with Toast or with, a different system that you're using, make sure
a newsletter or whatever, but basically find a way to collect info.
Exactly.
Contact info.
Everywhere on all your digital channels where you're collecting data, and grow that as fast and as much as possible. Because once you do that, and your marketing is going to be way more effective. Again, the rest of the stuff are channels. You can learn how to use those channels properly in time. Yeah. But if you don't have a database and you don't have anything to go with, and of course, this is taking into account that your operations great.
Right. Yeah. Because that's when they use Whisk. There's bigger fish to fry. And then the labor side, there's a million other things to do. But yeah, for sure. Yeah. Assuming that's like at least not on fire, and they're trying to, got it.
And one more thing that I would say is, have a plan in place from the beginning, because that's something that it's looked upon as an expense. Many restaurant owners, and I talk to them quite a bit all the time, marketing is considered as a last resort, as an expense, or as like, oh, we gotta do it, and they're just investing the least amount possible, paying their cousin or paying somebody to do it or whatever. And it's, there's no strategies, they're just kind of winging it, you know what I mean? And then when they're in trouble, they're like, oh, I need to find an agency, or to find help or whatever, or I need to hire. And they have no clue where they're starting, but they're already in, they're already in it, so instead of building it from the beginning, trying to build that later fast, it's a nightmare. So, I would recommend that's the first thing that they look at. They can look to hire in-house. If they're looking for an agency, they can do that as well. They just have to find the right partner. So not every agency is built the same.
Right. That makes sense. And, I'm curious from your perspective, because you see a lot of these things, you're in the weeds, your team's implementing things from, marketing strategies, paid ads, SEO, you name it, branding. So any interest, the answer is probably yes, but any interesting innovations or like emerging tech that like excite you specifically?
There's quite a bit of things that are happening, right, in terms of technology. What I see is like all of this technology is going to help reduce labor hours, because as minimum wages is up, and I understand why, but that's not easy for restaurants. So any of technologies that will help you to streamline that and to lower your cost, that's what I would keep an eye on. And I see the restaurants, kind of the future of restaurants will look becoming a lot more streamlined in many regards, right? Simpler menus, less people, easier, more effective in execution, and then you will still have your full service, like that where they deliver a whole experience, but they're going to be a lot less. So that's what I would say in terms of tech. Anything that will help you to control your costs, for sure. I would look at, and I would invest on. We were one of the group that I was part of. We were kind of one of the first ones doing Restaurant 365 at that time. And it helped really streamline a lot of things. And, also Toast, I think we were one of the first clients in Miami, and
that's awesome
to take that on. And anything, again, that could help, streamline the operation. We were always big investors in tech, because I think if used properly, it can help you quite a bit.
You have to find the right tool for you, but I couldn't agree more. Like the way I see it is like, listen, there's the restaurant prime cost is called a prime cost for a reason. It's your main cost. And if you think about the prime cost, there's just really two components, right? You got your labor and you got your COGS, your cost of goods sold. So it's like, you need to manage those too. If you're not managing that, like, I mean, there's other things too, but I mean, those are quite big. And so like, if you're not doing it some way, somehow, like you're missing out on a lot. And then I guess lastly is like, what advice do you have for restaurateurs seeking to build, a sustainable brand? Like, and I know that might be a loaded question, but just any wisdom you can share with people who are like, I want to help, build my restaurant. I want to build this brand. Hearing it straight from Sebastian with your experience.
Always invest in strategy. Don't wing it, because it won't work. And start building about processes and systems from the beginning. I think that's the most important. That's related to operations, that's related to marketing, that's related to finance, that's related to every part of the restaurant business. If you have your processes right and invest in developing those properly, then you have a much better chance of being a sustainable business. Like I said, many people get into the restaurant business that are creatives, but they don't think about processes and systems and investing in that.
Right.
From all of that. Then once they're in it, they're a mess, because they're not controlling their cost, their labor, their inventories, like everything is a mess. Forget about marketing. You know what I mean? Again, they're just kind of winging it. So if you're trying to build a sustainable brand, I think you need to have all those things in place. And the other thing that I would, definitely suggest is think about it in the long term. When it relates to marketing, for example, branding is a huge component of it, and as you've seen, and as you know in this industry, when you're starting out, they'll invest, that's fine. You'll invest in a logo. You don't want to spend $20,000 in a branding package, or 30, whatever. But as time goes by, do have it in your plan to then further develop that, because you're investing in building a brand, not just a business, right? Once you build a brand and you invest in that, the chances of building long-term value are greater, right? Because now, let's say you develop a few units and you invested in developing your brand. Now, if you want to sell it, it's going to be worth a lot more. Right? Yeah. Or if you want to grow, and if you're looking for partners to grow, they're going to be a lot more attracted to brands that have been built than just let's say a single spot, restaurant
generating
business.
X amount. Yeah,
different. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
You're
that
now
makes a ton of sense.
In a brand.
That makes sense. That's great advice. I love
anyways,
that.
I think that would be my 2 cents for people. If they're
getting
into this, it's crazy.
No, but it makes sense. And I guess to wrap things up, what's next for Breath, right? Like, you're working on a bunch of stuff, bunch of marketing initiatives. What's next for you guys?
We've been developing our team quite a bit, and I think we're just really finding the right people. And for us, it's just, continuing to help restaurants grow, and I think where we bring a lot of value again is just in developing having the knowledge of the restaurant business and being able to develop everything from scratch, really. And so for us, it's just, our next goal is really, it's always really how we can add more value for restaurants, right? And it's finding, we're always on track of what's happening with the industry and finding opportunities where, like I was saying with the private event stuff that we're doing now, because as things are looking, that's something that's of very high value for restaurants. So we're always looking for those type of things, right? So that's really what's next for us.
Awesome. And lastly, I always like to end off with the plugs. So just a chance for you to just say, how can people find Breath Marketing? How can they find you? I know you also have a book out, so maybe a quick plug there. We'll also put all these links in the podcast episode and on the pages, but just for people listening to the audio or maybe watching this on YouTube, if you can just plug where they can find you, the book, and anything else you want to plug.
Yeah, so they can find us at Breath. It's not as breath as in breathing, but Breath.
Right.
Let's go.
Yes.
At breathmarketing.com. And they can find us there on their website. They can look me up also on Instagram, Sebastian _Stahl B. They'll find me there. And then you can also, if you're interested, we did publish a book on restaurant marketing called The Restaurant Marketing Insider, where I actually go through all the strategies that we use to grow our businesses. And I get a little bit in depth into this. It's not about more tactics. This is a very strategic book. So if you guys are interested, you can look it up on Amazon. It's available there. There's a Kindle version as well. So that's where you can find us.
I love it. So we'll definitely link that, and I'd love to definitely link the book too for people interested. And I'll definitely be picking up a copy, because that'll be awesome. So with that said, thank you for being on the episode, Sebastian. Once again, CEO of Breath Marketing, Breath, BREADTH, for those listening in. Sebastian Stahl, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Angela. Appreciate you having me.
Feel free to check out whisk.ai for more resources and schedule a demo with one of our product specialists to see if it's a fit for you.